When Itachi tapped Sasuke's forehead for the last time just before his death, he passed on his Amaterasu, implanting the jutsu on Sasuke's eye and programming the Amaterasu to go off whenever Sasuke made eye contact with a masked man's Sharingan, who Itachi thought was Madara Uchiha, but it was actually Obito. This was one of Itachi's countermeasures to keep Sasuke safe, even after his own death. And the plan almost worked out. When Obito captured Sasuke after the fight against Itachi, he intended on telling Sasuke the truth, or most of the truth about Itachi's life, and he was about to remove his mask and introduce himself. When Sasuke saw his eye, his Sharingan, Sasuke's own eye turned into Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan pattern and shot an Amaterasu towards the guy. Obito gets hit by the dark flames, he screams, he falls back towards a shadowy corner of the room, and a couple of instants later, the screaming ceases, and Obito steps back into the light, completely unharmed. And this scene is cause for a lot of debate. How did Obito manage to survive a jutsu that once it hits you, it's supposed to be impossible to get rid of? The Amaterasu flames are only extinguished when the target itself is completely destroyed. This condition applies to fire itself. See the fight between Sasuke and Itachi when Itachi used Amaterasu to put away Sasuke's fireball jutsu. And yes, there are several ways that we see in the series that people can survive an Amaterasu shot against you, but Obito is the first person to do it. And the thing is, usually avoiding Amaterasu is done in three particular ways. One, you can dodge it, just like the Raikage did against Sasuke in the 5 Kage summits. Two, you block it, just like Naruto did against Sasuke in their final fight when he used the Kurama cloak to block the Amaterasu so that it wouldn't touch his own skin and he would be fine because he just discards the chakra cloak. Or three, you absorb the jutsu with some sort of ninjutsu absorption technique, most prominently the Preta path of the Rinnegan. And Obito didn't do any of those three things to survive Amaterasu. The most obvious answer for him would be to simply activate his Kamui and the flames would phase through his body, hitting the wall behind him. Now, Amaterasu doesn't really have a traveling speed because the flames ignite where the user is looking at. They simply appear. It's not as though you are shooting the Amaterasu from your eye to the target. No, the flames just come into existence there. And then, if the target manages to dodge Amaterasu, the flames still ignite in that location, and then they travel towards what the user was looking at, like a projectile. We see that most prominently when the Raikage dodged the Amaterasu. The flames simply appear where the Raikage was, but he managed to move away from them faster than Sasuke could activate them. And then the Amaterasu simply traveled backwards and hit a samurai that was standing behind the Raikage. So it is extremely difficult to dodge Amaterasu simply because of this factor. The flames don't really have a traveling speed, so you have to anticipate what's gonna happen. Something that Obito did in the war arc. When EMS Sasuke launches an Amaterasu against him, he manages to use his staff, the staff he gained when he absorbed the Ten Tails. It's a pretty powerful version of Obito, much more powerful than Orange Mask, but he did something more difficult than simply activating Kamui in that situation because he couldn't use Kamui in the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails state. He twirled his staff and blocked the Amaterasu flames. Now, he was able to predict that because he saw chakra building up around Sasuke's eye and thought, okay, he's gonna shoot an Amaterasu against me. Let me try and block that. And obviously, Obito was extremely fast and had a great reaction time, so he managed to do so. Orange Mask Obito could in theory see chakra building up on Sasuke's eye as well. He had a Sharingan after all, certainly not as powerful as a Rinnegan, but it would still be able to see chakra building up. And that wasn't just it. Sasuke's eye began to bleed and turn into Itachi's Mangekyo shape. It was very obvious that something was about to happen. Amaterasu is not the most inconspicuous jutsu there is. Like, you literally cry tears of blood before shooting the dark flames. So why doesn't Obito simply use Kamui and phase through the flames? Well, there's a theory that Obito let himself get hit by the flames on purpose. He was trying to convince Sasuke about Itachi's truth because he wanted Sasuke to turn bad so that he could exploit Sasuke for his own gain afterwards, and showing what Itachi was willing to do, implanting an extremely powerful jutsu on Sasuke's eye just so that he could keep Obito away from him is a very effective way to say, I am telling the truth here. Itachi was trying to protect you from the grave. Itachi's actually a good guy, Sasuke. This may sound crazy, but there's the proof. And you may say, oh well, it doesn't really matter how Obito avoids the Amaterasu because the Amaterasu itself is the proof. But then again, getting hit by the dark flames and surviving them is much more theatrical and impressive than just having the flames phasing through you. Yes, phasing through them is much more optimal and certainly more effective if Obito was actually fighting against Sasuke, but getting hit by Amaterasu and surviving it is a show of strength as well, and much more impactful for Sasuke that was watching everything unfold and confused. And if Obito saw that he was about to get hit by Amaterasu and chose to be hit by it because he knew he had other ways to defend against it, he would try to take advantage over the situation and do something more interesting than just phasing through the flames. Now, we never get confirmation this is the case, that Obito got hit on purpose, but it does fit, even though Kishimoto tends to explain the actions of characters that had second intentions in the series. Whenever a character does something deceiving that's out of the ordinary, that's trying to fool somebody else, the audience included, Kishimoto tends to explain the situation afterwards. Take Itachi, for example. Every single action he took was essentially a lie, and his entire backstory got explained. Now yes, this is way less important than Itachi's entire character, and explaining it wouldn't really change that much about the story, but if that was Kishimoto's intention, it's likely that he would have explained Obito's actions here and why he wanted to be hit by Amaterasu even though he saw the attack coming. And because it was never explained, the more likely explanation is that Obito was just caught off guard by the Amaterasu and didn't expect that coming from Sasuke. He does seem pretty impressed by Itachi's actions and even says that if Itachi knew all of his secrets, he would have been dead. And yes, this could also be theatrics trying to get Sasuke on his side and explaining Itachi's actions further, but these statements are never contradicted later, and so it's possible that, yeah, Itachi just caught Obito off guard there with Sasuke's Amaterasu. But this still doesn't answer the question, how did Obito survive the Amaterasu in the first place? We know he has Hashirama cells and can regenerate, but he cannot out-regenerate the damage Amaterasu deals, and also we see that the flames are gone, they vanish. Once Obito emerges from the shadows, he's just fine. There's no fire anymore, there's not even a scorch mark, which means that Obito did not use Kamui to dodge that attack. And you may say, well, but if he's not hurt at all, if there's not a scorch mark, obviously he used Kamui and phased through the jutsu, but the problem is that he got hit by Amaterasu. The initial burst of fire ignited around his shoulder and it quickly enveloped his entire body. He stumbled back, we don't see exactly what happens, and when he re-emerges, there's no fire anymore. Because if he had phased through Amaterasu, completely negating the jutsu with Kamui, the flames wouldn't have caught him. They would pass through Obito and hit the wall behind him and do nothing to him essentially, but no, they burn him and he screams, and yes, it may be an act, but the flames were burning him. They were on his body. Some people say that the flames only hit Obito's clothes, and then when he stepped back to the shadows, he used Kamui to phase his real body through them, meaning that his skin was safe and therefore his body wouldn't burn because it didn't take too long for him to get rid of the flames. But if that was the case, then his clothes would be at least a little bit damaged by Amaterasu. I mean, there's nothing indicating that Obito's clothes are extremely powerful against fire or anything like that. And if the strongest fire in the universe hits his clothes, I suppose they should be a little burned at least. Also, if he had used Kamui, the flames wouldn't just disappear. Yes, they go away when the target is completely destroyed, but Obito would quote-unquote disappear from reality. He wouldn't be destroyed. So it's much more likely that once Obito phases through the Kamui dimension, the flames that were wrapping themselves around Obito's body would simply hit the wall behind him, and this doesn't happen. Obito did not have an absorption jutsu like the Pretapath in that state, so he couldn't simply drain the dark flames and fizzle them out. Some people say that he had the Spiral Zetsu body attached around him, but no, Obito does not have Spiral Zetsu attached to him ever since he fought against Minato. The only times we see him with Spiral Zetsu is when he fights against the Bloody Mist ninjas and when he meets with Nagato for the first time to introduce himself as quote-unquote Madara Uchiha. Uchiha. He does have Zetsu arms as replacements for his own arms because he lost them, but he doesn't have an armor of Spiral Zetsu surrounding him that could tank the dark flames for a while. We do see how Obito gets rid of a jutsu that infects you forever and doesn't let up until you're completely destroyed when he was fighting against Fu and Torune and he touched Torune's arm and his arm got infected by those nanobugs. If you think about it, it's kind of like Amaterasu. They're gonna keep on destroying you until you're destroyed. And his solution for that was to literally cut his arm off. I mean, it was a white Zetsu arm because, yeah, his arms are replacements, but he still cut off his arm. Exactly how the Raikage dealt with being burned by Amaterasu in one of his arms. He just chopped it off. But clearly that's not what he does here. Because first of all, the Amaterasu pretty much engulfs his entire body. And second of all, when he steps from the shadows, his entire body is fine. He is unharmed. There's no limbs missing. Which only leads us to one final explanation as to how Obito did it. Izanagi. One of the strongest genjutsus in the series, a genjutsu that's cast on the user itself and shapes reality around him, changing it, allowing the caster to literally be immortal for a certain amount of time. Now, the first time we're formally introduced to Izanagi is in the fight between Sasuke and Danzo, but Obito surviving the Amaterasu here is pretty clever foreshadowing. We know from the Obito vs Conan fight that Obito has a spare Sharingan on his left eye, not his original one, obviously, because that's with Kakashi, but a Sharingan from a random Uchiha that probably died in the Uchiha massacre. It's on his socket, and it makes perfect sense for him to have that spare eye to use Izanagi just in case, you know? It was pretty useful against Conan in that ocean of paper bombs. It literally won him the fight, which he was supposed to die on, and in here, it wasn't that effective because maybe he could have just dodged Amaterasu with Kamui as I mentioned before, but if Obito was caught off guard, then Izanagi here and his spare Sharingan saved his life. The problem with Izanagi is that once you get hit by something, if you haven't used the jutsu yet, you are gonna take that damage. So Obito had to activate the jutsu before the dark flames hit him. A good example of that is when Sasuke is fighting against Danzo, and Danzo deactivated his Izanagi because he thought he had won the fight by paralyzing Sasuke, but Sasuke uses his Susanoo and aims a Susanoo arrow at Danzo. He doesn't have enough time to weave hand signs to reactivate Izanagi, so he has to sprout out that tree from his arm and deflect the Susanoo arrow, otherwise he would have died. If the arrow hit Danzo, he would have been severely damaged, if not killed outright, but even if he survived and used Izanagi afterwards, he would still be hurt, because the damage happened before Izanagi was activated. We see the exact same phenomenon in the fight between Obito and Conan. He activates Izanagi when he falls towards the ocean of paper bombs, and then he returns and kills Conan because she didn't expect that. However, before Obito had activated Izanagi, Conan managed to blow one of his arms off. No news here because Obito loses so many arms during the series, but regardless, when Obito comes back revived by Izanagi, even though the paper ocean exploded for 10 minutes straight, he didn't have that arm back. It was exploded before he activated Izanagi, which makes things a little bit more complicated here if we're going with a narrative that Obito was caught off guard. Because if he was, then activating Izanagi wouldn't have completely negated the damage because it would have been done after the flames hit Obito. Also, we do not see Obito weaving hand signs for Izanagi. We know Danzo had to do so, but in the fight against Conan, it's pretty much implied he didn't have to weave hand signs for Izanagi, perhaps because he's more experienced with the jutsu than Danzo, even though I kinda doubt it because Danzo had 10 Sharingan in his arm, but Obito was also a more powerful ninja with a true Uchiha KK Genkai, so we can assume he could activate Izanagi without weaving signs. Then again, Madara kinda breaks every single rule with Izanagi because he activates his Izanagi after he was dead in the fight against Hashirama, so maybe Obito's Izanagi is more powerful than Danzo's. I mean, it certainly is because one single Sharingan eye bought Obito more than 10 minutes worth of immortality, while Danzo's eyes bought him just 1 minute each, because the paper ocean from Conan lasted for 10 minutes, so we know that's the bare minimum he would have to do to survive that thing. And he only had one spare eye. He certainly didn't go blind with his Kamui Mangekyo, meaning that because he was a true Uchiha, he probably has a much better version of Izanagi, and therefore he was able to use that to impress Sasuke, taking the dark flames in the face and just stepping back into the room completely unharmed. Do you think he faked being hit by the Amaterasu when he could have just used Kamui instead? Or was he caught off guard? Also, how do you think he survived Amaterasu? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe to this channel if you enjoy my content, and like the video so we can beat the YouTube algorithm. Watch this other cool Naruto video right here as well, and thank you so much for watching.